He's editor-in-chief of Breitbart News and a New York Times best-selling author. And on this podcast, he brings deep research, prescient analysis, and world-class guests. He's Alex Marlow, and this is The Alex Marlow Show.
The Alex Marlow Show. I'm Alex Marlow, back on my main set after a whirlwind DC trip. I will tell you, I've not slept in a bed in 2 nights, and that is something I'm looking forward to tonight. I'm going to break the streak. We're up early. We're at first hits tomorrow at 5:30, but publicity tour for Breaking the Law is going really well. And if those of you new to the audience, thank you for being here. We're in the top 100 on Apple News, first time ever for that. We're in the top 20 on Apple News commentary, first time for that as well. So that's big. We try to give you the best daily news show. Today will be slightly different, though. I'm going to lean on Alex and Friends with the great Peter Schweizer. He's going to be here momentarily, the preeminent investigative researcher in, I would say, the conservative movement in general, but maybe beyond that, maybe in the entire country. Multiple time #1 New York Times bestselling author and a colleague of mine at Breitbart News. So I spent a lot of time with him, nearly 40 minutes. We go through the Lawfare, what he wants to see investigated. We go through the Russia collusion hoax and the announcements of investigations into that. I get his take on the Jack Smith Hatch Act. And then I get his take on some more contemporary news items. The redistricting going on in Texas. Is he jacked up about that? Spoiler alert. Yes, he is. Then I ask him even about Jim Acosta, the former CNN anchor, I would say disgraced CNN anchor, who is now on Substack interviewing AIs of dead children or a dead child, someone who was murdered during the Parkland massacre all these years ago at 17, has now been regenerated as an AI. This is just disgusting, exploitive, and marks a new low in journalism, perhaps. I get Peter's take on that as well. So all of that to come in the show, but I will start off with a thank you to new people in the audience and those of you who are supporting the book. It is a labor of love to do these things, but I genuinely believe if people read Breaking the Law, we can save the country from the existential threat of the Lawfare superstructure that is hard at work right now, trying to look for ways to rig the 2026 and 2028 elections and to make it so that it is impossible for conservatives to operate in, if you are loyal to Trump, loyal to the MAGA movement, in all of the areas you should be able to be free and have equality under the law in this country. Maybe it's debanking. Maybe it's not being able to get the same jobs at a prestigious law firm, or maybe it's something as extreme as getting sent to jail for absolutely nothing. They want to curtail your freedoms, and we must stop them. Now is the time, and the spirit is there. Feels like the timing is good. I was on a Bannon show twice, and this morning he said it was divine providence that Breaking the Law came out. I thought, wow, kind of had chills thinking about that. Divine providence that it came out right now. So recommend it to 10,000 friends and family members, and I thank all of you for considering it and indulging me the commentary on it, because it really has been a year in the making to get to this point. But thanks for all the support. I'm popping up all over the place right now, and it is, let's see, Bill O'Reilly yesterday, Clay and Buck yesterday. We're on, let's see, Mike Gallagher tomorrow, Chris DeGaulle tomorrow, Jesse Kelly tomorrow, Alan Jackson on TBN. Love that very much. And Newsmax, all that stuff. It's great. It's exciting times. And hopefully it can pop up on your favorite show, wherever that may be, because I'm very eager to talk about things I've uncovered and to get people jacked up to try to start restoring justice and law and order in this country. I think this could be the beginning of that. So yeah, it's been wild. I will tell you, back-to-back red eye, sort of. I told you about the red eye last night, immediately going to media hits in the cab on the way into DC, quick nap, did that on top of the bed, so maybe that counts. And then Clay and Buck show and Bannon show, my speech, I will air my speech. It's on the front page of Breitbart now, but I will put that in the feed that I gave to the Young America's Foundation, where I connect some of the modern news stories, some of the stuff we're talking about, really to the lawfare that's going on and why I think it's such a threat. It is sort of a thesis paper of a speech, if you will. And I got a lot of great feedback on that. Had just a blast signing books for students. It really was such a pleasure to see engaged young people who are taking our country seriously. It's an obvious point, but it really was heartening. So it is, if you ever see me, if I show up in your area, please come by, say hi. It means a lot. And also emailing me aloha@alexmarlow.com, posting reviews. I read all the reviews that are online. There's not that many. So I'll get around to reading all your reviews. If you liked it, loved it, I don't know why you wouldn't, but leave a thoughtful review and I will eventually read it. And I'll probably read some of them on the air, post them on my socials, stuff like that. And booked it out of town at the last minute. got home at 1 a.m. and now we're here. We're ready to rock for more exciting content. It is a really kind of a thrilling August. This could be a very sleepy month for the news business, and there's a lot of hot stuff going on, and I'm happy to be in the thick of it. So before we bring in Peter, though, I do have a terrific sponsor. You guys know that I am a soda guy. I am going to have a Diet Coke the second I'm done with this recording. It has been, I wouldn't say one of my vices because it's got no calories. It's not even that bad for you. But the American Beverage Association is on board with this show. I had a great interview with them recently, which you all should check out in my feed if you're new. But you get to think for a minute about the drinks that you grew up with and that you still love today, the ones you got to have at the barbecue or in the break room. We were talking about Coke, Dr. Pepper, Pepsi. These are iconic brands. They're part of the American story, and they have been for over 100 years. With everyone talking about American jobs lately, the companies behind these beverages have been walking that walk the whole time. America's beverage companies are making American products with American workers in American hometowns. They employ over 275,000 men and women in all 50 states. These are people who show up every day, do the work, deliver for our economy and our communities. See for yourself everything they're doing at wedeliverforamerica.org. The website is wedeliverforamerica.org for the American Beverage Association and the good work that they're doing. And I'm going to get to that Diet Coke in a second, but you're going to hear from Peter Schweizer right now. Check it out. All right. One of my best friends and most important mentors in the conservative media space, Peter Schweizer, is my guest for today. Peter, you are giving me a real breather here because I will tell you, I have not slept in a bed in the last 2 days. I did 2 red eyes in a row. I got a last minute speech booking for Young America's Foundation, which I will make that speech available for a podcast. People are really enjoying that one. So thanks to all of you who listen. By the way, I should thank all the new listeners. We're our best rating ever for the podcast on Apple, which is part of the fun of writing books is that you get in front of new people and new audiences. So welcome. We have a good time here. And normally I do a bit more monologuing than I will on this show, but I've got one of the best in the game, Peter. But Peter, they added a flight from DC to LA at 10 p.m. And so I did end up on that. So I did the red eye and I did the 10 p.m. to 1 a.m. flight on the way back. And I had my first hit at 5:30 this morning. So it's been wild. Do you have a wild book road trip story? Because you probably actually had to hit the road in a former time to sell books.
Well, I was going to say, first of all, I think it's so great and it's so kind of inside the beltway, if I could say, Alex, which is usually not like you, to be editing this major publication at Breitbart, having this amazing podcast and writing this amazing book, and you're kind of bitching about your schedule. I thought, this is, come on, man. When you write a great book like this, of course you're not going to get any sleep. But
thank you.
No, I used to, I started writing books in the 80s and 90s, and you actually did like bona fide book tours where you'd go to like Houston, Texas and Dallas and things like that. And when I did my first book, I remember I did a book signing and I think it was in Dallas and the times were mixed up. So I went to a book signing and there was literally nobody there, like nobody there.
Goodness.
And you're kind of sitting there, kind of hoping and begging that somebody, and finally some, sweet older lady took pity on me and bought a copy of the book. So yeah, I've been through all that stuff. It's an exciting and energetic time. But as we've talked about before, I believe in books. I believe they're so important. We live in a world where, as Rush Limbaugh would say, there's all these kind of drive-by hits that take place, but you never get a full depth of understanding the weightiness of what's happening, I think, unless it happens in a book. So I applaud you for, not just saying I'm going to do the publication of the podcast. I'm actually going to write serious books because they really do matter. And as you know, I don't need to tell you, they are a lot of work.
Yeah, they're a ton of work. It's the hardest thing I do. I make that point a lot of the 3 major things that I do, editing Breitbart, and which was, of course, very hard because that was 24/7, all consuming for well over a decade. But between that and the podcasting and the books, the book writing is the hardest, but that tells me it's important. I'm stretching muscles in my brain that I don't want to stretch. I really don't. And when you take on a project like that, and I imagine that doesn't change, Peter. You've written a few more books than I have, several more #1 bestsellers than I have, which my tally of that's 0 thus far. But it is.
You'll get there, brother.
When you get started, it doesn't feel good, right?
No, No. It is it is a brutal way to make a living and expound your ideas. And I get young people. I'm sure it happens to you. Come up and say, "Oh, I want to do what you do. I want to write. I want to write books." And I kind of say, "Really, why? Why do you want to do it?" Because if you don't want to do it because you feel the need to do it, and it's the only platform to really convey what you want, there's so many easier ways to do it. The problem is, in my mind, it comes down to depth of understanding. And the reason that you can talk about the lawfare that they engaged in against Donald Trump in a way that nobody else can is because you've spent so much time thinking about it, writing about it, and researching it. And most people are doing 15 other things at the same time in that depth. So it's an exercise in creating a product, but it also disciplines your own mind and gets you thinking about very important subjects in a very detailed way, which is so important in this world where everything seems to be moving so quickly.
Yeah, this one's been an interesting one because I'll tell you, even as editor of Breitbart, I couldn't have told you if you gave me a quiz, is this detail from the Jack Smith case or the Tish James case, or is this from the Alvin Bragg case? Like I couldn't have necessarily, I wouldn't have got 100% on that before I started doing this book. And then now I feel like not only do I understand them, but I've conveyed it to the audience in a way where they'll understand it and they'll also understand how they're connected, which is important. And a lot of the connective tissue comes straight from the White House. And Peter, let me plug your stuff, and then I want to start at that premise. But Peter hosts the Drill Down podcast, which I never miss. It is fantastic, completely well researched. You should all be subscribers to that. He's a president of the Government Accountability Institute. Any of you who have deep pockets want to contribute, you should head over there, GAI. And all of Peter's books are must reads. Many of them #1 bestsellers are on the New York Times list, which is almost impossible to do for conservatives. And of course, senior contributor for Breitbart News. So I'm probably left some other titles as well, but everything Peters does is amazing and is a real leader in the space, particularly the book space. But I want to talk about this concept of that. It's crystal clear that the White House is quarterbacking the lawfare, the Biden White House. We don't know exactly who. And it feels it doesn't feel sufficient enough just to say, oh, that's the Hatch Act. Can't do that. What do you think is an actual path to investigate, confirm this, and then start holding some people to account for clearly trying to rig the 2024 election by throwing Trump in jail?
Yeah, I think you nailed a couple of important things there. Holding to account, what does that actually mean? And the issue of what they engaged in and what it means in the context of legality. And I run into this all the time in the research we do in corruption involving the Clintons, the Bidens, Mitch McConnell and others. And that is there's corruption that takes place, and the really smart people in Washington figure out ways to engage in what I call legal graft. This is basically corrupt behavior, but they're lawyers or they have smart people around when they figure out a way to structure it in such a way where it's not actually taking a bribe, even though it really is taking a bribe. I think it's the same thing with this lawfare. I mean, they're very, very shrewd and smart in the way that they conducted themselves in making sure that they didn't cross obvious legal lines. So I think the first thing that's happening, your book, I think, is a great start in that, is figure out exactly what happened. Because we don't know. It was done in secret. Right. We know that these meetings took place. We know that there was coordination. We know that there was a political component to this, but it happened. I mean, just remember over the last couple of years how quickly this happened. Things just, you got the raid on Mar-a-Lago. You got the charges in Georgia. You got the charges in New York. And so we have to go back and have a counting of what actually happened, who did what, and then be able to ascertain what kind of criminal conduct occurred and how charges can be brought. So I understand the desire for people to say, I want the slammer door shut. I want people in jail. But you first have to do the heavy work that anybody who's watched a detective show knows. You have to actually see what the crime was, who did it, and find the evidence for it. And I think if we do that, we will actually find that.
Yeah, I'll give away a couple of spoilers here, and you guys can get my full explanation if you guys pick up the book. But I offer a little hope in that regard, in that we want the perp walks, we want the slammer doors shut, and all that stuff. We want them to take the bracelets out and get all the bad guys. But I'll tell you, that's not always in our control. What is in our control is elections. And if we stay motivated and focused and vigilant on a grassroots level, then we can assure that new corruption doesn't take place by virtue of voting in the right people and making sure the people we do vote in don't support bad people to get top jobs. So I do think there's a lot we can do medium to long term, even if we get disappointed here. Not to say that's an excuse. We need to have the investigations and we need to have a thorough accounting. But we can be a little more methodical. And I do cite some examples when I go through my history of lawfare, Peter. And I've been repeating this on the show. I can't believe this is something that I'm kind of latching on to this myself. But a lot of our best legal victories in this country over the past half century or so have actually just been through slowly, methodically changing things to our liking by winning and being charismatic, finding the smartest people, staying out of trouble. And that's our day-to-day task. And it would be great to have a really flashy, high profile, we finally got the bad guys moment. And that moment should come. We deserve it. But if it doesn't, don't get too discouraged and just hang in there, because we can change the course of the country by virtue of what we can do with our own power.
Yeah, no, I agree. And the sort of cynicism that you see sometimes online, whether it's corruption, whether it's fighting the battles over lawfare, where people say, oh, nobody goes to jail, nothing happens, this is ridiculous, nothing matters. The only people that benefit from that attitude are the perpetrators, because they don't get held into account. They don't have their reputations damaged or destroyed by their conduct. And the behavior continues to happen because all the good people who want reform, who want good government, who want there to be accountability, just get discouraged and leave. So I agree with you. I mean, what we also don't want to do is do essentially what the Democrats did beginning in 2021, which was the definition of the dirty cop, which is I found the guy, Donald Trump, and now I'm going to figure out the crime, which is what they did. We don't want to be those people. So we want to be methodical about it. I still think you look at, instances of lying before Congress, people may poo-poo that. That is actually a serious crime. And if we're going to bother to put people under oath, and you have guys like, John Brennan and some of the other people that engaged in this conduct, lie before Congress, they should be held into account. So there are real tools there to make this happen. The question is, does the GOJ and the prosecutors have the opportunity to do that? And that's what we're going to have to wait and see.
Yeah, and that's one thing that the book does do is I walk through where I think the investigations for the lawmakers should begin, and also for any special counsel office that could take interest, but also stuff that we can do as people and arguments you can make, identifying some of the people who are the puppeteers behind the scenes who are funding these things, and I think giving a lot of arguments that this is really, I think, the scandal of the century, and it is one that hopefully we're starting some major conversations here. But let's do our pie in the sky moment, Peter. We get the handcuffs, we get the perp walks, we get the investigations. From and I'm not trying to quiz you on the whole book. I'm just trying to your perception of lawfare against Trump. Where would you like to see stones turned? Where would you like to see investigations? What piques your curiosity, given that we are in power and we have a chance to look into these things?
Well, I think the key is the Department of Justice, and you zero in on this in your book, I think quite rightfully so, because, the guys like Joe Biden come and go, and we don't even know how much of him was actually there when it came to some of this stuff, or the White House
Very related to this stuff, considering what was going on in his White House when he obviously was taking a nap or licking an ice cream cone. I kind of picture him like he's the type of guy lick the ice cream cone and then the ice cream might fall off and hit the floor, do the 5-second rule, plop it back on the counter. That's what he was up to while all this was going on.
Yeah. And the people that do the heavy lift, it's the same people. If you look at the lawfare you talk about in the book, if you step back a little bit further to 2016 and the Russia collusion stuff, it's a series of lawyer operatives that work in and out of the Democratic Party and the Department of Justice. When there's Democrat president, they work at the Department of Justice, they assume senior positions. When there's a Republican, they leave and then they go to these nonprofits or they work for these big law firms. These are the people that are the water carriers for a lot of this misconduct. So I know that the big flashy names get people excited. Oh, Joe Biden, or the Attorney General. Maybe, but where the heavy lift is actually done is, I think they're right in looking at Jack Smith, looking at these legal professionals at the Department of Justice. Start with them, and it's like a classical criminal conspiracy case. You start with them and you work your way up the food chain to see what you can develop. But I think that's where you really need to focus your energies, because those are the foot soldiers that have done the most damage. They're not the big sexy names, but they are the ones that I think engaged in this conduct at the behest of the big names. And if they want to turn on the big name people and share their information, we are more than happy to hear that. That's how I would approach it.
And that's part of our role in the media, and part of my role. I'm trying to introduce people to some characters who really, I think, were the supervillains of this. And they're not all household names. Some of them aren't even known to people who spend a lot of time reading conservative media. But, we can introduce people to those who are really engaged in ill deeds, illicit deeds here. Peter, so if we're investigating, what are the questions that we should be able to get answers to? Because I look at the timeline of these cases where there are people who are flowing from the Biden world into these courts to try to take out Trump. And then these people who are not in the Biden world, who are working on the cases, and all of a sudden they're at the White House for who knows what reason. Do we have a reasonable opportunity to try to figure out what was being discussed in those meetings, or is that just gone to into oblivion?
No, I think that's where you need to start. I mean, the issue of the coordination and the collaboration, I think, is where things get very interesting. Look, if the Department of Justice had decided just in isolation, hey, we're going to raid Mar-a-Lago, looking for these documents, that would be bad enough, right? And there's all kinds of questions about executive privilege and the role of the president and how that was found. That's all a fair point. But the fact is, you have that in coordination with Alvin Bragg's work in New York, in coordination with the stuff that was being done in Georgia, the independent counsel, all of this stuff working in coordination, I think, is what gives you the camel's nose under the tent to really begin to peek in. And you look at some of these people that are in vulnerable situations, like Fannie Willis down in Georgia, and say, you know what? Look, there are some serious questions of misconduct involving you that could damage and destroy your career. Sit down and talk to us and tell us, when you went to the White House, when you went to Washington, what did you talk about? Who did you talk to? Get her, subpoena her communications, subpoena the email, the internal emails of the White House. This is all information that should be gotten. And I would hope that an investigation would cover. And yeah, you can delete emails, but they never really quite go away. And if we know anything from what came out about the Russia collusion stuff, there's a lot of stuff that is communicated via email, and I think it would be the same when it comes to Lawfare. So you want to show the coordination, you want to show the joint efforts, you want to look at the people that are vulnerable potentially legally, and you want to put them in a vice and say, what can you tell us about these other meetings? That's how I think you start to get progress. But you've got to have people at the Department of Justice that are prepared to do that are smart in doing that, and I hope we're going to move in that direction.
People deserve law and order to be restored. They deserve justice for President Trump. They deserve there not to be two tiers of justice in this country, which is clearly proven to be the case. You prove that better than anyone, Peter, when you introduced the clear crimes that were taking place by the Clinton family, and no one could make that stick. I mean, we did politically, again. That's why I'm saying let's be upbeat about it. We beat Hillary Clinton in one of the greatest upsets in modern political history. So it did work, but it didn't work in the traditional sense, in that there was never any legal, no one's head rolled legally. But a lot of my core audience, and a lot of people who are probably just showing up here the first time, having heard me somewhere else this week, they really want to see the perp walks and the handcuffs. They deserve that. And I don't want people to get cynical about the process, but I'll tell you, I was someone that, during the Durham investigation, where every other day be Durham, there's another Durham news cycle. And I thought, I don't know. It's like, I feel like if he was going to get him bad, we would have got him by now. And the thing kind of ended up sort of fizzling. I guess we're back on it now to some degree, but how do we keep people from being too cynical and disappointed? How do we convince people that We got to be patient here, and the people in power now or in place now have a better chance of getting to the truth than what we had last time around.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the ways to think about this is when I was younger, I loved watching boxing in the Olympics, right? I just loved watching boxing. And one of the things you quickly realized in the Olympics was there were very few knockouts. Very few knockouts. And I think the expectation that people have is when you find something, in the Durham report or something related to the Clintons, this is the knockout. They're going to end up on the canvas and they're not going to be able to get up. That's extremely rare. So what you have to understand is when you're fighting corruption, when you're fighting misconduct, malfeasance, it's a boxing match. It may be a 3-round match. It may be a 15-round match, a professional boxing match, but you can't get fixated on just going for haymakers, just going for knockouts, because if you do so, A, it may not work, and B, you may create your own vulnerability yourself. So you've got to view it as a long and systematic thing. You mentioned the Clintons. Think of where we are today, right now. When I wrote Clinton Cash in 2015, we got all this media attention, made a big effect in the 2016 election. What we now know, based on, Jeff Girth reported this in Columbia Journalism Review and the documents that have come out, what we now know is when those initial reports came out, the Clinton campaign saw this as her biggest vulnerability. So to cover up the actual Russia collusion that the Clintons were engaged in, they created the fictitious Russia collusion with Donald Trump to distract everybody from it. So that was something they did 10 years ago. We're only now figuring out precisely what happened. So things take time. When you're dealing with powerful forces, powerful institutions, powerful people, it's not something that's just going to happen in a quick half round where you knock somebody out. And if you think that, you're either naive or you're just kind of immature, because people don't cede power that easily. The other thing we have to recognize is that John Durham, when he was there in the Department of Justice, he's doing this independent investigation. He doesn't have the institutional support. Who wins elections makes a big, big difference. And so what we have going on right now as it relates to the Russia collusion narrative is, what do we have? We have reports that there has been a grand jury convened, and they are going to be looking at criminal charges. So it means the media is not going to determine this. Congress is not going to determine this. Ordinary Americans in the grand jury are going to hear the evidence. And the other thing I would say is, think of also what's happened. The House Oversight Committee has subpoenaed Hillary Clinton, Bill Clinton, and other people to come and appear under oath what they knew. Who would have thought that that was going to happen? So look to those victories, look at those successes, and be realistic. That's what I would say. That's
how I feel. I feel very positive about it. It feels like we could be in a real season of investigations, and maybe we could end up getting the goods this time around. I'm not that negative this time. I feel more confident. I've got a cynical streak to me in this regard, but I feel very hopeful here. Peter, this is a great segue, because I do want to get a more extended take for you on where we're at with the Russian collusion investigations. But I want to make this point, because this does tie in to the Lawfare, and it makes your mind wander where this thing could go. But a point that I've been making in some of my media hits, and I want to emphasize this today, that the one set of criminal convictions against Trump, the Stormy Daniels case, which is still pending appeal, this case would not have happened if not for the Russian collusion hoax. Here is the connection. The FBI got a warrant to surveil Michael Cohen, the Trump fixer, his Gmail account via the Justice Department and special counsel Robert Mueller's investigation. Mueller's office was also investigating Cohen for possibly acting as an unregistered foreign agent at the time. Weeks later, U.S. Attorney's Office for the Southern District of New York got warrants to access Cohen's email as well. This is obviously coordinated, but we don't know the extent of it. We don't know literally what was approved and when. But it seems to me crystal clear here, the basis of the Stormy Daniels lawsuit was the Russian collusion probe, which we now know never should have happened.
Yeah, it was an absolute fishing expedition. They used the Russia collusion, which we now know the FBI knew at the time, was not real. And the information released by Senator Grassley shows that you had coordination, that you had senior Department of Justice officials were saying that the FBI was going to gin this up, was going to push this agenda. Pro-Clinton forces in the FBI were going to gin this up. This is coming from these internal FBI reports and documents. So we know what was going on here. And this is enormous, I think, vindication for anybody and everybody who believed that this was a witch hunt going on with Donald Trump. A lot of us surmise that and believe that. It is an absolute slam dump in terms of the case of the evidence. And the point that you're making, which I think is vitally important, is this is the problem with lawfare. This is the problem when you weaponize the government. You don't even have to prove the original thing that you're investigating. You just want the investigation because it allows surveillance. And then based on the surveillance, you can find out other things, even if there's no, criminal conduct involved. The Stormy Daniels thing was not criminal conduct in any way, but you can use that as a political weapon. And that is the problem and the nefarious nature of this lawfare. And I have a feeling, given what Democrats are feeling now when the roles are reversed in the sense that they are now the ones being investigated, but I would say for legitimate reasons, they're realizing this is not something maybe we should not have opened this can of worms because we now realize how potently this can be used against people.
And how big of a deal is that, Peter? If we could reset the government, and this is the thing that I think a lot of people, what makes them cynical, is that they're understanding that part of the lawfare superstructure and the apparatus that I'm trying to identify, it's part of our deep state. It's really an extended version of that. And what are the paths you see to just cleaning up the bad actors who are within these bureaucracies, these bureaucratic agencies?
Yeah, it's a good question, and we probably could do a couple of hours on that.
Probably do have a few hours.
Yeah, you've got first of all cultural problems, and what do I mean by cultural problems? These government agencies, especially DOJ, is so insular. The talent that goes and works at the DOJ tends to be, especially at senior levels, tend to be career government employees, or they tend to be people that come from these mega law firms, which lean politically left. So they don't get fresh ideas. They don't get fresh input. They don't get, skeptical questions about the way things are done. You get groupthink and you get consensus. And that consensus tends to be a right of center is bad, left of center is good. So that's the first problem, cultural. And I don't know how you change that. I mean, there are probably things you can do at the margin. I don't know if you move the Department of Justice, to Birmingham, Alabama, whether that changes it, but you've got to look at the culture of it. I think the second thing you've got to look at is the risk reward. And there is too much reward for this kind of behavior. People that come in, they serve as, deputy attorney general in administration. They engage in misconduct and abuse, and then they leave and they get a great deal at one of these powerful firms because they either did them favors or they advance certain political interests. And there's very little risk for that behavior up until now. Now you've got reputational risk, and you've got the ability to have your career and reputation damaged by revealed information coming out. So transparency probably would help in terms of that culture. So you've got cultural issues, but then you've also got systematic issues in the sense that you want to have a criminal justice system where they can operate privately to develop a case, but that privacy also allows you to engage in what I would call conspiracy behavior. Conspiracy in the sense of the law when you're engaging in misconduct with other people in a coordinated way. So there are lots of things that need to be done. I think one of my biggest disappointments right now with the Trump administration, whether it's the FBI or DOJ, I don't see a lot of evidence of that reform taking place. I see people getting fired. I see people leaving. I see there's a lot of good talk. Look, we're only, 7-8 months in, so, I don't want to be too impatient, but I haven't seen any big plans rolled out to say, here's how we're going to fundamentally change these institutions. So if a Democrat gets back in the White House, we don't get back to square one on the first day that they're in office.
It's a great call to action, and even extends beyond the government. I was talking to Bannon about this earlier on his show about how it's also cultural outside, in the sense that the major white shoe law firms are, left-wing havens, and it's a lot easier to make money in the legal space if you're not associated with Trump and his movement and our values. And that's also very toxic, because it just it encourages their best minds to go into this world and our best minds to go elsewhere, try to make a living. And that's also very dangerous, because not everyone, Peter, is just going to get up and do this work just for the good of God and country, which is a noble pursuit. But, that's how I think of myself. But your calculus changes a little bit as you start accumulating law school debt and you start accumulating children, things like that. Then it's just like, well, wait a minute, maybe I don't want to deal with this.
Yeah, well, law is by definition a field of institutions and predicate and traditions and standards. And if those institutions and those standards are dominated by individuals from the political left, look at the American Bar Association. The things that they allow liberal Democrat lawyers to get away with, that if a conservative lawyer did, they would never allow it. That creates a predicate. So even if you are somebody who's in the Federalist Society, you're going to an Ivy League school, and you want to go out in private practice, and you want to practice corporate law, let's say, if you want to go to a big law firm, chances are that's going to be a law firm that all of its pro bono efforts go to left of center causes. And now you're presented with a dilemma. You want to practice your profession. You want to do the right thing. Maybe you're thinking, I can maybe change this law firm a little bit and move it to a more central direction. But it's an uphill battle the entire way. So that's why I think it's very exciting, what I would call the creative destruction that Trump is engaged in with these Ivy League schools, with the universities, with these big law firms. Is saying, you know what? Sorry, we're not going to just cede the field to you anymore. No, you're going to have to explain your conduct, and you're going to have to operate in kind of a balanced way. And we're going to make sure that you're exposed when you don't do so. I think that's very healthy and good in seeing these institutions renewed.
Yeah, very good recommendations, and I think hopefully people in the administration and the audience are taking those to heart, because it's a big battle. 100,000 plus people in the DOJ. That's more than 7 months to clean that place up, and a lot of work needs to be done. Give me your quick take on any of the new announced Russia or Jack Smith investigations. I know we touched on it quite a bit, but is there anything that you're particularly skeptical about or excited about? I mean, like Jack Smith, the Hatch Act, great, but there's so many Hatch Act violations that I think I point to. I can't prove, I don't have that sort of subpoena power, but I point to a bunch of them in the book. So great start, but are we satisfied? How do you feel about the prospect of maybe the deep state Russia, the John Brennan, James Clapper business model of a leak on the government and then get MSNBC contracts as a job? Maybe that could be going away. Any thoughts on this big, all the latest news?
I'm very encouraged so far, and here's why. Number one, we're not putting all our eggs in one thing. So you've got the congressional hearings where, again, you're going to have these people under subpoena, including Bill and Hillary Clinton and others, where they're going to have to answer questions. Now, if they want to plead the Fifth Amendment, when they're so vocal in so many ways and other things, the American people, I think, are smart enough to know that speaks to a certain level of guilt, and I think further reveals exactly what was happening. So I like the fact we've got congressional hearings. We have this grand jury that's apparently been convened. We have other independent investigations that are taking place. I think this is good and healthy. You want it happening on multiple fronts. And what I think is particularly good about the grand jury is, again, this is not going to be litigated by a group of lawyers in the end. It's not going to be determined by the mainstream media, essentially putting something on trial and determining what happened. It's going to be the American people. It's going to be a pool of Americans. And I think we all have to be prepared, assuming that the DOJ officials involved with the grand jury are presenting the evidence and doing so in a real way. We all have to be prepared for the grand jury to say, this was terrible, this is awful, but we don't think it was critical. criminal. That I think is a healthy way to approach this. So I'm very encouraged right now. I might be in a different mood 5 months from now, but I like the fact that it's hitting on all cylinders. You've got various institutions involved, and there's some very specific questions that can be asked of Jack Smith and these other individuals. I want to know, for example, with Jack Smith involved in the Hackdatch, what was his communication? Seize his records. What was his communication with political officials? That's going to be very, very interesting to see.
Yeah, it really is. I can't wait for that. Absolutely cannot wait. Good. Good. I'm glad you're positive too. That sounds good because I know that it's the you would know as well as anyone. You're as authoritative on this, Peter. It's very tempting to keep you for many hours more, but I want to be somewhat kind to you about your time. I'm Peter's boss like 4% of the day, so I can take advantage to some extent. But yes, I want to get your take on a couple of quick things that are also hot in the news. The first one is this Texas redistricting effort. You're someone who I think comes from a very similar part of the conservative movement to me, is that you want us to be an intellectual movement. You're a very nice guy in person, but I think you understand that we need to fight fire with fire. We don't really help ourselves by playing by the Marquis of Queensberry's rules, because the left doesn't wait for us to change the rules. They change them on their own. But I did want your perspective on this, because we're being pretty aggressive here. And once we make our bed, we got to sleep in it. I'm very happy to sleep in it in this case, but I wanted your take. I've been on the road. It's been a whirlwind, and I've been fueled by coffee. What else? And none other than Crockett coffee. Keeps me alert, and it tastes great. Roasted to perfection in small batches, on purpose by experts who love the taste of great coffee. Roasted in our nation's heartland and delivered fresh to your home. Crockett Coffee is also an anti-communist, pro-American brand founded by Buck Sexton, Clay Travis, terrific broadcasters. I was just on their show the other day and had a great time with them. And they're smart. Dark roast, mild roast, light roast, decaf, mushroom organic blend. I have not tried that. I've got to try that. Got the K-Cups going. It's really a quality cup, and it is good people. Even some of the proceeds go to Tunnel to Towers Foundation, because people Crockett Coffee, they never forget. And right now, you use Alex promo code at checkout. Use the code Alex. First 20% off your order. That's crockettcoffee.com. Use my name, Alex, as the promo code, and you'll get 20% off.
Yeah, no, I think look, gerrymandering has taken place for decades. My favorite story on this thus far is the governor of Massachusetts standing up and says, if Texas does this, we are going to do more gerrymandering in Massachusetts. The problem being Massachusetts has all Democrats in Congress. So there's no advantage to further gerrymandering in Massachusetts. That just shows you sort of how out of touch they are. But yeah, I think it's something that is good and necessary. There's a question, I think, about what Texas law says about this. Certainly you want it to be compliant with Texas law. But this is something that has gone on for a very long time. And if you look at some of these states like California, people always think of California as this left-wing bastion. 43% of people in California vote Republican on these cases. They certainly don't have anything remote to that representation in California. Why is that? It's the way they carve out the districts. So this is done all sorts of places, and I think Texas should be doing it as well, provided that it's compliant with Texas law. I know there's a question about that. I don't know the answer to it. I always believe that you need to obey the laws. Yes. If you want to change the law, pass it through the legislature. That would be the only caveat I would put to it.
I guess all roads are leading back to Lawfare, or maybe that's just where my brain is. But I do make that recommendation, which I know will disappoint some people in the book. But I think I lay it out pretty well, that I don't want us cheating to get what we want. I want us to abide by the law. I want us to win fair and square. I think that's the best long-term strategy by a mile. But clearly you agree. Why do you think so?
Well, I think because number one, I mean, presumably if you're on our side of the aisle, you have a certain set of core values that makes you a conservative. One of those core values is, belief in the law and belief in justice. So you don't want to, in terms of principle, engage in behavior that violates that. The other thing, though, is live by the sword, die by the sword. People that say, oh, we should get rid of the filibuster. Well, you get rid of the filibuster, and the Democrats are in power with a slim majority, they can use that against you. So realize that what you use as your weapon, they will use as a weapon against you. I think that's another practical reason for doing it. And finally, I just think that in this day and age, where people are, they are so cynical and frustrated by politics in general. If you can kind of stand on principle and do things on principle, I think it does help you with people. And I think this is one of the areas where Trump gets unfairly criticized a lot. People say, oh, he's always breaking the rules. He's actually not. I mean, this is a guy that abides by what the Supreme Court says. He'll express his frustration. That's fine. He abides what the rules are in terms of, the bureaucracy, presuming that's what the law says. And I think that's the way that you want to proceed. It's the right thing to do. And I also think pragmatically, it is a pathway to success.
Peter, I can't resist getting your take on Jim Acosta, the CNN journalist, interviewing an AI version of a dead child. I do the big dive on this on our Breitbart Confidential show with John Nolte today. Those of you who want more, but I got to get your take on this as someone who pays attention to some of the stuff over the years. Feels totally surreal to me.
Yeah, no, well, I'm laughing out of disgust and kind of shock because seriously, I mean, the best way that you can make a case for this position you have on gun control is to take somebody who died and turn them into a political prop. But this is unfortunately what happens a lot with the left. Everything is political. Nothing is sacred. I think it's going to backfire. I think it's already backfired. The Washington Post wrote a piece on it that certainly didn't seem to endorse it. But again, it shows the desperation. And I think for so many people on the left, unfortunately, I have friends that are there. This is their religion. This is their faith. And everything is justified because their faith doesn't actually have these core sets of conductive principles that say the Judeo-Christian tradition does. So all bets are off in terms of conduct. It's all about trying to win this victory that you want to have. And that leaves you in a really terrible place. And I think that was in full display in what Jim Acosta was doing.
Peter, anything else on your mind that you wanted to share with the audience? Anything you're working on, you want to tease that maybe send us somewhere?
Well, I'm in a place right now where you've been before, Alex. This week for me is fact-checking and legal review on a book I have coming out in January. So I'm in a actually pretty jovial mood just seeing you and being on your show. But as soon as this mic goes off, it's back to the dungeon for me.
Oh, boy. It's hey, you know what? But it'll be worth it soon. You'll be standing on top of that mountain yet again. Peter Schweizer, Government Accountability Institute. The Drill Down podcast, must listen. Any of his best-selling books and the not best-selling books. You had a couple of those decades ago. They're still probably good. What's the latest one? What would you like people to get if people are going to buy a book today?
Well, I think Blood Money shows a lot of what Trump's doing on China policy. We identified the techniques that China's using against the United States, the people that are complicit, and Donald Trump. The book came out in January 2024, but now Trump is, I think, really using it as a roadmap for his China policy. So I feel very, very excited about that.
Well, Peter casts a very long shadow with his research and has been a big inspiration to me over the years and someone I always touch base with in these particular moments. All right, Peter, let's talk again. Hopefully next week I can have you on the Breitbart Show. We can do some more there, but that's it for now. Thanks to producer Misty. Thanks to John Cassio helping me with all the great clips that you're seeing online, and to all of you in the audience. We'll talk to you tomorrow.